Brandon Mars.
How do you spell that, sir?
First of Brandon, B-R-A-N-D-O-N, last of Mars, M-A-R-Z. Your Honor.
M-A-R-Z?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Can you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Detective Mars, can you please tell the court where you are employed?
I'm employed with the Kent County Sheriff's Department. I'm part of a task force with the Wyoming Police Department and Kentwood Police Department, along with the FBI. And I'm currently office at the Wyoming Police Department.
And what is the name of the unit, the task force that you're currently assigned to?
Metro Pattern Crimes Team.
Now, I want to direct your attention back to August 30th of last year, 2022. On that particular day, were you asked to assist with an investigation involving the Kent County Sheriff's Department as well as the Wyoming Police Department involving the disappearance of Mollie Schmidt?
Yes, ma'am.
And what were you asked to do on that particular day, August 30th?
I was asked to assist with a search warrant of an apartment on 44th Street.
And was that 44th Street in the city of Wyoming?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall the address?
I believe it was 1542. Referencing my paperwork.
And is that a single-family home or is that an apartment complex? If so, how many units are in it?
That's an apartment complex. I believe there's 4 units per floor, and it was the first floor.
Now, who resided at that particular apartment, or why was it that you were executing a search warrant there?
I was informed by investigators that a young lady, Garcia, was at the apartment 3. Mollie's vehicle was also found in the parking lot outside of that specific building.
Now, when you arrived there at the apartment, were you with other investigators or officers from various police departments?
I was.
Now, how did you and the other officers gain entry into that apartment?
I met with a maintenance worker who provided a key, and I used that key to open the door to the apartment.
Now, were you the first officer to enter into the apartment?
Yes, ma'am.
Why don't you describe to the court what procedure you followed when you entered the apartment?
We approached the door. I inserted the key into the lock cylinder. I knocked several times, announced that it was please a search warrant. I gave the appropriate amount of time for somebody to come to the door if somebody was inside. Once that did not happen, I unlocked the door, swung the door open, and then we entered the apartment.
Why don't you describe to the court your observations as far as what you saw or any other thing relating to senses that were going on when you first entered the apartment?
I entered the apartment. The apartment itself was dark. It was warmer. Didn't appear that the air conditioning was on. Just from an observation from the door, it appeared there was a kitchen to the left, the living room to the right, bathroom to the rear of the apartment, along with what I believe to be a bedroom. When I initially stepped inside the apartment, I smelled what I believed to be the faint odor of decomposition inside the apartment.
Now, you indicated that you were with other officers, however, you were the first officer to go into the apartment, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, once you enter into the apartment, why don't you describe to the court how your search unfolds? Initially,
we cleared the common areas of any occupants. Again, the apartment was dark. We proceeded to the rear bedroom. It appeared to be a 1-bedroom apartment. The apartment bedroom door was closed and latched. At that point, I manipulated the door handle, swung the door open, and entered into the bedroom.
And why don't you tell the court what, if anything, you discovered when you entered into the bedroom?
When I initially opened the bedroom door, the stronger odor of decomposition came out of the door itself, out of the room itself. I proceeded into the room. I first observed what I believed to be human feet, and then I looked further, and it appeared to be our victim, Mollie Schmidt. She was in a supine position with her head and torso facing upwards next to the bed.
Now, you mentioned that you smelled what you initially described as a faint odor of decomposition, and then a more significant one once you opened the door. How many years have you been a police officer?
8 years, ma'am.
And have you, in the past, been exposed to deceased individuals whose remains had been left unpreserved for a period of time?
Numerous, yes.
All right. Now, once you located Mollie, why don't you describe to the court what you did next?
Just initial observations, she appeared to be deceased based on the odor of decomposition. She had a large wound to the right side of her face. There was blood and hair in a pool surrounding her upper shoulder head area. We completed a clearing of that specific room just to verify that no additional people were inside, and then other investigators arrived on scene to assist with the search.
Now, I'm going to show you what's been marked as proposed exhibit number 1. And does this look familiar to you?
Yes, it does.
And does that picture fairly show the way it looked when you opened that bedroom door?
Yes,
And is that the exact position that you found Mollie?
yes.
All right, Your Honor, we move for admission.
No objection, Your Honor.
It will be received.
Now, once Mollie was located, what was done there at the apartment and what were you involved in?
I was involved with the initial search of the apartment for anything of evidentiary value. The forensic science unit from the Wyoming Police Department had arrived at that time and began to process evidence. I proceeded to assist with writing the search warrant return for any evidence or items recovered and seized at the property.
Okay. And where specifically within the apartment did you search?
I searched mainly the area in the living room around the couch.
Now, how long did you remain on scene there?
It was several hours, ma'am.
And you said you were the one who completed the search warrant return?
Yes, ma'am.
And then once you completed the return, what did you do with it?
The return was provided to investigators and then a copy was given to the court.
Now, when you searched the living room area, did you locate items relating to either Garcia or Mollie Schmidt? Any paperwork, anything like that?
I didn't directly, I know other investigators had observed property belonging to both.
All right, thank you. I don't have any additional questions.
Mr. Hunting?
Thank you. Detective Mars?
Yes, sir.
Mark Hunting, how are you?
Doing well, how are you?
Thank you, I'm good. There is a return of search warrant, which basically is anything that you, as you're doing your search, and I don't mean you yourself, I mean you collectively, all of the police, you filled that out. Is that your testimony?
Yes,
But is it fair to say that you didn't find anything that's listed on that return of search warrant? You yourself did not find anything?
correct. I just observed.
It was all other people?
Correct.
So they find something, they bring it to you, and then you put it on the return of search warrant, and it gets placed into evidence, is that fair?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. However, that wasn't the only thing that you did with respect to investigating this, is that true?
That's true.
You actually had some contact with employees where Mollie worked, is that true?
That is correct.
The next day, according to your report, you spoke with at least 3 individuals about Mollie, did you not?
That is correct, yes.
And you also obtained some surveillance footage from that, the establishment where Mollie works. Did you get a copy of that surveillance video?
It's all on hard drive, yes.
And it's been uploaded to evidence.com or whatever?
Well, it was quite a lengthy amount of video, so I'm not sure how it was uploaded, whether it was on evidence.com or not.
But it's in the police's possession?
That is correct.
And it's saved?
Correct.
In addition to that, did you not obtain some video footage from a Speedway store located on South Sprinkle Road, which I believe is in Kalamazoo?
Yes.
You obtained that when?
I don't recall the exact date. I would have to reference my report on that.
I've got a copy of the report. I'll show it to you. I'm not sure I can tell. That's why I'm asking.
Okay. without referencing the email I sent to law enforcement, the 7/11, I wouldn't have an exact date for you. I just recall obtaining that video, yes.
Right. So you sent an email to them saying, hey, do you have any video? They said yes. You said save it.
That's correct.
And you save all your emails so we could go into like your sent folder or something
Absolutely,
like that?
yeah.
Okay.
I can provide copies of that for
Okay.
discovery purposes, yes.
I'd like to also ask you a question about this, because this is a part of your report, right?
Correct, yes.
Is there a reason why we don't have the time here?
That was just a typo.
Okay. Now, you were at this apartment based on a search warrant, correct?
That is correct.
Did you have any involvement whatsoever in the drafting of the search warrant?
I did not, no.
The return of the search warrant, yes, but not the drafting of the search warrant?
Correct, I did not physically draft the search warrant.
My understanding of how procedurally this happened is search warrant gets authored, gets approved by the court, you guys enter the apartment, you find Mollie's body, then everybody makes sure everything's secure, then they back off and you wait for crime scene technicians to come in to take photographs
Yes,
before you actively start searching through things, is that right?
that was correct, yes.
So exhibit one, which has been entered, I think it's exhibit one.
It is.
Exhibit one that's been entered is a photograph before any searching took place.
That's correct.
And then, once the searching takes place, additional photographs are taken as you're finding things of evidentiary value. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
All right. And then those things are collected, put into evidence bags, and then listed on a return of search warrant. Fair?
Yes, sir.
So you had a portion of the search in the living room area, but you yielded nothing of evidentiary value.
That is correct.
Okay. One moment, Your Honor. I do have one other question. This has not been admitted into evidence yet, but if it's okay, I'm gonna show it to you just to kind of refamiliarize
Yeah,
yourself.
you can actually use the markers in it if you want, it's the
Sure.
same thing, so that you can reference the number.
Ultimately, this is likely to be Exhibit 20, and it's a sketch of the apartment. Do you see that, sir?
Yes.
Okay. And you've described the apartment as you recall it from when you came in. I noticed the living room area, there's an arrow pointing to that. Did you see that?
Yes.
That's where you searched?
Yes, over on the, if we're facing south, it would have been kind of the south side of the apartment complex there,
Okay.
as indicated by the arrows.
Does
And
anybody have any objection to the exhibit 20 being
I don't.
I know.
admitted?
Looking at Exhibit 20 and the living room area, I see an indication that reads slider. Do you see that?
Yes.
Did you yourself check to determine whether that slider was locked or unlocked?
I believe it was locked. I did open it for airflow.
Did you check to see whether it was locked or locked?
Yes, because I physically opened it.
Okay, so it's your recollection specifically that that slider was locked?
Yes, and it should be on my body worn camera as well.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Mr. Nitzke?
I don't have any additional questions.
All right, any objection to this witness being excused?
No.
Mr. Hunting?
No objection.
All right, thank you.
And our next witness will be Dr. Stark, who's appearing via Zoom, so hopefully,
Hopefully he's in the queue.
yeah, hopefully he's in the queue and we're being heard
And I
upstairs.
think we are being heard upstairs, so I'm sure that we've got somebody on. Or the assistant court administrator.
Sounds like there might be an issue with the camera, so the video, I guess, is just,
I can see you.
okay.
Oh, Dr. Stark?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, we just can't see you.
Oh, can't see me. Let's see about the camera. Hold on 1 minute.
You bet.
Start the video.
Yeah.
Very good.
Is that better?
Yes, it's perfect. Doctor, can you,
Oh, good.
can you state your name for us?
Yes, we can do the volume up a little bit. Okay, I'm sorry, David Allen, A-L-A-N, Start, S-T-A-R-T.
Thank you. Can you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You can't see, you can just see me, can't you?
That's correct, yes.
I think it's important that you probably take a look at the attorneys more than me. See if I can do something about that. Yes, I can.
Does that camera all move? Oh, look at you.
Yeah. There we go.
Are we ready?
Proceed.
All right, thank you. Dr. Start, could you please tell the court what you do and where you are employed?
Yes, I'm a forensic pathologist and deputy chief medical examiner for Kent County. I work at Spectrum Blodgett Hospital here in Grand Rapids.
How long have you been employed in that capacity?
For the past 26 years.
And in your capacity, are you responsible for performing autopsies?
I do, yes.
Can you estimate how many autopsies you have performed during your career?
Yes, at least 6,000.
And have you previously been qualified as an expert in the past in the area of forensic pathology?
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, at this point I'd ask if Mr. Hunting is willing to stipulate for purposes of the preliminary examination to qualify Dr. Start as an expert in the area of forensic pathology.
We'd stipulate to that, Your Honor.
He should be qualified.
Thank you. Dr. Start, I want to direct your attention back to August 31st of last year, 2022. Were you the forensic pathologist that was responsible for performing an autopsy on Mollie Schmidt?
Yes, that's correct.
If you could provide us with Mollie's basic information, her height, weight, age, at the time of her death.
Yes, she presented us her autopsy, and her listed age was 33 years. Height was 61 inches or 5 foot 1 inches, and weight was 100 pounds.
And what was the condition of Mollie's body when you performed the autopsy back on August 31st?
Yes, she was in an advanced state of decomposition, which is a natural process where a body deteriorates because of the bacteria that's in our body. After we die, if our body is at a room temperature or warmer, then the body will deteriorate, the bacteria will proliferate in the body, and that consisted of bloating of the body as well as skin slippage where the skin starts to slough away, green discoloration, and also drying of exposed skin surfaces, including drying of the fingertips or early mummification.
Was she clothed when she was brought there to Blodgett for the autopsy?
She was, yes.
Now, during your autopsy, do you typically start with an external examination of the individual?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And why don't you describe to the court what that involves and what, if anything, you located during that external examination?
Yes, so initially I view the body with the clothing. Clothing is categorized and removed. The body is then photographed. It's also cleaned so that I can identify any sort of injury that might be present on the body. And then a complete external examination from head to toe, front to back is performed. And during that examination, I identified a gunshot wound of the, what we call the superior or the upper right forehead area.
And could you describe like the size or any other basic information about, you indicated it was a gunshot wound and where it was?
Yes, it was a circular gunshot wound, again of the superior right frontal scalp or upper right forehead. It was centered 1 5/8 inches right of the anterior midline. So if I draw a line right down the center of my face, it was 1 5/8 inch right of that line and 2.5 inches below the very top of the head. And so that were the external features of the gunshot wound.
Now, were you able to determine whether it was an exit or an entrance wound?
This was an entrance wound.
Okay, how do you determine that?
So entrance wounds are typically circular or oval and have what we call an abrasion collar, where there's scraping of the skin surrounding the entrance wound. Also on internal examination, it had typical features of an entrance wound in the defect in the skull. And then a bullet and bullet jacket was found internally in the brain with no other exit wound. So this was an entrance wound.
Now, with respect to that entrance wound, did you locate or look for any other type of evidence or ballistic evidence that would typically be involved with discharging of a firearm?
Yes, so when a gun is fired, in addition to the bullet coming out the end of the barrel, there's burned gunpowder or smoke, which if the end of the barrel is close enough to the skin surface, you may get soot or burned powder on the skin surface. And also coming out the end of the barrel will be unburned powder. And so I look for both of those, either soot or unburned powder on the skin surface, and I did not identify any soot or unburned powder. Also on the internal examination, I look for any soot that may be driven into the wound that might be present on the bone. That was not present either. So those would be, if I would have found those features, those would be features that may be indicative of a closer range gunshot wound, which again, I did not identify any soot or gunpowder around the entrance wound.
And when you're looking for that, when you're talking about close range, do you have an approximation of what distance a firearm would be from an individual if you were to find those soot or stippling?
Yes, so with a typical handgun, unburned powder could go out and deposit on the skin surface at a maximum range of up to about 4 feet. It's going to vary from type of gun and type of ammunition, but generally speaking, a typical handgun, you're not going to see powder deposited on the skin surface if the shot was fired from 4 feet or greater.
So the lack of it indicates to you that the firearm was fired from at least 4 feet away from Mollie Schmidt.
Yes, it would be consistent with that, yes.
Now, you did discuss internally what you located with respect, at least initially, with respect to this gunshot wound. If you could you provide information about the track of this gunshot wound?
Yes. The wound track as it's going internally into the head is front to back, right to left, and downward as it goes through the skull and through the brain. And within the brain, I identified a small caliber lead core, bullet lead core, and then jacket, a separate jacket. Sometimes with a bullet, you'll have the bullet is the lead core, and then it's surrounded by a copper jacket. And not infrequently, those items may separate as the bullet goes through the bone into the tissue. And so those portions of the projectile separated and identified both within the disrupted brain.
Now, I guess I just want to back up a little bit. When you talked about the lack of soot or stippling, but you've also indicated to us that Mollie Schmidt was in the advanced stages of decomposition, correct? would
That's
the-
correct, yes.
Would the decomposition process at all affect whether or not there would be a presence of soot or stippling on her body?
It could, in particular, because of the decomposition and skin sloughing, if you will, where the skin, the epidermis or the superficial layers of the skin can slough away. For instance, if there's just soot or the smoke from the weapon, some of that could be, if there was soot there, could be altered by the decomposition where I may not be able to see the soot. With the stippling, where there's individual powder grains that get deposited onto the skin, even with decomposition, I would expect to have seen that around the wound if it was close enough, and I did not see soot on stippling on the skin surface.
Now, did you locate during the external or internal examination any other injuries on Mollie Schmidt that would be of any significance?
I did not know. The significant injury was the gunshot wound of the head.
Now, you did indicate that, that through the decomposition process, it does cause some discoloration of the skin. Would it be consistent if some of that discoloration were to appear potentially to be bruises?
It certainly can appear to be a bruise, in particular looking at the skin surface, because some of the skin surface will begin to dry or become darker and somewhat mummified, and that can may mimic a bruise, yes.
So if there is any discoloration on her body, that could be as a result of the decomposition process?
Yes, in my opinion, that's a result of the decomposition. I did not identify any other significant injuries other than the gunshot wound.
Okay, and you didn't find anything that you would appear to be consistent with bruises or any type of bruising?
That's correct.
Now, in addition to your examination of the body, is there also a toxicology screen that is completed when an autopsy is performed on an individual?
Yes, that was done in this case. There was no blood available for testing due to decomposition. With decomposition, the blood essentially becomes absent during that decomposition process. It kind of diffuses into the tissues. And so we have what's called decompositional fluid in the pleural cavities and the chest cavities. And so we use that fluid for a drug screen.
And was there anything of significance with respect to those toxicology screen results?
Yes, there were drugs and or medications identified in the drug screen. Ethanol or alcohol was at a level of a 0.09 or 92 milligrams per deciliter. However, that level of ethanol could all be due to decomposition. As our bodies deteriorate, the bacteria within our bodies can produce ethanol. And so at a level of a 0.09, that all could be from just decomposition. Does not necessarily mean that she had ingested ethanol prior to her death. In addition to the ethanol, it was identified other drugs would be nicotine, caffeine, venlafaxine, which is an antidepressant medication, amphetamine, and cocaine metabolites. Those were the only drugs that were identified on the.
What are cocaine metabolites?
That's the breakdown product of cocaine. The medical term is benzoyl-lecithin, or abbreviated BZE, and so that was identified on the screen. However, when they attempted to quantitate the amount of the breakdown product or metabolite of cocaine, the BZE, it was below the limits of detection. So even though it was picked up on the screen, the amount of BZE is so low that it's not, they're not able to do a quantitation of it. So that would, excuse me, that would indicate that at some point prior to her death, she had consumed cocaine, but certainly not not in close proximity prior to her death because it's almost all completely out of her system. There's just a very small amount that continues to be identified on the screen.
Now, is there anything about any of the substances that were located in the screen, in the toxicology screen, that contributed at all to Mollie Schmidt's death?
No, the drugs did not have any significant contribution to her death, no.
Now, on your report, you indicate that the date and time of the death was on or about August 21st of 2022. And obviously, you've just testified that you conducted the autopsy on August 31st. How is it that you arrive at that date on or about August 21st of 2022?
Yes, so determining the date of death and or time of death is one of the more difficult areas in forensic pathology. It's very difficult to make that determination with precision, especially after several days have gone by and you've got decompositional changes. So the first thing we begin with is when she was last, the date when she was last reliably known alive. And from the information I was given, that was on August 21st. And then, of course, the ending point is when she's found deceased, which was August 30th. So we have about a 9-day window in that time frame. And her decompositional changes at autopsy were quite advanced, so that, for instance, I couldn't retrieve any blood from her body. Her organs were beginning to deteriorate or liquefy. The brain was nearly completely liquefied from decomposition. And so those changes are certainly consistent with a time frame of a death occurring on or about the 21st, given those changes.
Now, you testified to the gunshot wound that you located on the right side of Mollie's head. Were there any other injuries or anything that you found that could have contributed to her death?
No other injuries or natural disease process that would have contributed to her death, no.
Now, based on your internal as well as your external examination during the autopsy of Mollie Schmidt, do you have an opinion as to her cause of death?
I do, yes.
And what is...
Yes, the cause of death is the gunshot wound of the head.
And likewise, did you also determine or have an opinion as to the manner of Mollie Schmidt's death?
Yes, the manner of death is homicide.
I don't have any additional questions.
Mr. Hunting?
Thank you, Ed. Dr. Stark, Mark Hunting on behalf of Mr. Garcia. How are you today?
Just fine, thank you.
Great. I do have a few questions for you. Trying to work a little backwards. Ms. Janeski asked you about the estimated, I guess, date of death. We can't really put a time on it. The best we can do is a day. Is that fair?
That's fair, yes. I cannot give a specific time. The best you can do is give an estimated date. That's correct.
And you explained why you thought August 21st would have been, of 2022, would have been the date of death. Is there a plus-minus range that you can give to that?
Certainly, given the degree of decomposition, I would say it could be a few days on either side of that estimate. Now, if she's reliably last seen on the 21st, then obviously it's not going to be a few days prior to that, but certainly it could be up to a few days after that date, yes.
And define for me, if you would, doctor, what you mean by a few days.
Well, I would say in the range of perhaps 2 or 3 days. She clearly had been dead for several days, given the decompositional changes. It's just very difficult to be precise. So if someone said it was 7 days, 8 days, 9 days, certainly all within that time frame are reasonable estimates.
So if in fact she was physically seen by somebody as late as August 21st, is it fair to say that you could have her date of death as far removed as August 24th?
That's possible. I can't rule that date out as well.
So any day from August 21st to August 22nd to August 23rd to potentially August 24th would be, in your expert opinion, a reasonable sort of guesstimate, for lack of a better phrase?
Well, it's an estimate, and it's taking into account, obviously, the autopsy findings in isolation, given that time frame. Obviously, investigative information can be very useful in helping to determine a date of death, but just from the autopsy findings itself, that's certainly a reasonable time frame, yes.
Yeah. So it's fair to say that on your autopsy report where you have date and time of death, it could be anywhere from August 21st of 2022 all the way to August 24th of 2022, fair?
It could be, yes.
Now, Ms. Janicki talked to you about stippling or gunshot residue, and I believe you indicated that you found no evidence of any of that, correct?
That's correct.
And while I don't believe you, at least for purposes of today, have been qualified as an expert to testify as to proximity of the firearm, based on your many years of doing this and many years of seeing gunshot wounds, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's your testimony that this, the gunshot that ultimately took Mollie's life was from more than 4 feet away. Is that fair?
That's a reasonable estimate for a typical handgun, yes.
And you don't know yourself, sir, and I don't think you would have any reason to know, but you don't know yourself, sir, whether or not the police did any gunshot residue testing within that apartment, do you?
I'm not aware of that, no.
And that's not typically something that you would find out about anyways, correct?
That's correct.
Now, we've had one photograph admitted as an exhibit so far in this preliminary examination. And it's a photograph that was taken by the police upon discovering Ms. Schmidt's body. I don't believe that we intend to publish any of those things here today, but you testified when she came in for autopsy, she was clothed, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And do you take note of the status of the clothing when you first start examining the body?
I do, yes. The body is photographed as it is received into our facility with the clothing present, and then those articles of clothing are documented, yes.
Okay. Now, I don't see in your autopsy report the following, but I'm going to ask you whether or not you recall it or whether or not your photographs indicated, because I don't have, I should say I have some of your photographs. When you received the body, was there a stain on Mollie's pants in the groin area?
I'd probably have to review the photographs to recollect, to help my recollection. I typically don't comment on stains in the clothing, especially with decomposition, because that's so common. As the skin starts to slough away with decomposition, then fluids will come out from the skin surfaces, if you will. And then certainly in the groin area, typically there's what we call purge fluid or decompositional fluid that would be on the clothing, yes.
And that, I guess, groin area purge fluid, as you describe it, is that something that would happen sooner than fluid release from other areas of the body?
It may. Typically with decomposition, you may get purge fluid come out the nose and mouth area, and also in the genital area as well, yes.
You do note, however, in your, excuse me, one second. You do note in your report that Ms. Schmidt has had a tubal ligation, correct?
Let me.
It would be on
I'm
page.
just referring.
Sure, it would be on page 4 of 6, at least as far as my report indicates.
Yes, the fallopian tubes had sites of interruption consistent with a tubal ligation, yes.
Which is effectively, layman's terms, having your tubes tied.
That's correct, yes.
However, when tubes are tied, a female is still able to menstruate, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So that doesn't prevent menstruation, it just prevents impregnation.
That's correct. Having your tubes tied, if you will, or tubal ligation prevents the egg from going through the fallopian tube to be fertilized. So yes, it just prevents pregnancy. That's correct.
The stain in the groin area upon examination of the clothing, did anybody ask you to test that to determine what that stain was?
No, that's typically not any testing we would do. We remove the clothing and then that's provided to law enforcement. There's no testing that I'm aware of that we would do, that I would do on the clothing.
Okay. And nobody has circled back around to you to ask you to do that, right?
No.
I mean, you wouldn't do it anyways, but nobody's
there's-
asked you to do it, right?
No, there was no question to do any sort of specific testing on the clothing. That's correct.
Take me through the explanation, because I'll be honest with you, I probably wasn't paying close enough attention. With respect to the drug, or the toxicology screen, the drug screen, that's from blood or that's not from blood? What's being tested here?
No, it's a decompositional fluid. On the drug screen, on the report, it'll say drug screen blood comprehensive, but it's not actual blood. That's just their term that they use. But the fluid that was actually tested is decompositional fluid, so fluid that builds up in the pleural cavities.
Okay, so even though it says blood on what I'm looking at, you're here to say that's not in fact blood?
That's correct. That's the label that the lab uses. They have a comprehensive blood drug screen and a comprehensive urine drug screen, and so when we use decompositional fluid, unfortunately that's put into that category of blood, even though technically it's not blood.
Okay. You testified with respect to, I think, the cocaine metabolites, that even though they existed, they were at such low levels they really couldn't be quantified. Is that fair?
That's correct, yes.
Is there anything, how about the amphetamine?
Yes, so amphetamine was identified. They did do a quantitation, although given that it's decompositional fluid, that quantitation is not, there's no way to correlate that level that they give with any sort of physiologic effect because it's decompositional fluid. So basically that's a confirmational study to say that yes, amphetamine was present, but the level of 8,800 is not really relevant to looking at a level in blood because the material is decompositional fluid.
Venlafaxine is 2,900 nanograms. Is that the same?
That's correct, yes.
Would you have the same sort of argument there that, hey, that's not accurate?
Well, that's correct. It's a level that they have in the decompositional fluid. However, you cannot correlate that level with a true blood level. And so certainly she has venlafaxine present, but whether it's elevated or at therapeutic levels, you just can't say because, again, you're testing decompositional fluid as opposed to the blood.
So is it fair to say, doctor, that with respect to all of these various results from the decompositional fluid, that the only real use it has for us is that they exist? They're in that fluid, but whatever the numbers are, have no bearing whatsoever, cannot be correlated back to a blood level result. Is that fair?
That is, yes, that's correct.
One moment, Your Honor. Doctor, I recognize that you're not an expert in ballistics, but you did testify a couple of different times as to a small caliber bullet was recovered. Do you have any basis to indicate for us what caliber that bullet was?
No, I can't be specific. The bullet in the jacket are given to law enforcement, and then they can, the crime lab can then be more specific as to the caliber. So by small caliber, that could be anywhere from a 22 or a 25, or perhaps even a little larger than a 25. But I would not be able to tell a specific caliber, no, just that it's a smaller caliber projectile.
Okay, well, based on that then, can you give me the outside high range of what you would consider to be a small caliber?
Well, generally speaking, if you get to a 38 or a 9 millimeter, then that would be out of the range for a small caliber.
Okay, so anything short of that you would consider to be a small caliber?
For my purposes, yes.
Thank you, no further questions.
Mr. Niski?
I do not have any additional questions.
All right, Dr. Stark, I think we're done with your services. I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
I just want to confirm one thing before you go. That's not a real foot behind
Oh.
you, correct?
I'm sorry?
I just want to confirm that that's not a real foot behind you. Is that correct?
Oh, I apologize. Oh my goodness, yeah, we had a few decorations at our conference room from a Christmas party, so I apologize for that. But yes,
Okay.
that
You have a
is
great
not
day.
simply a decoration.
Okay, you have a great day.
Okay, thank you.
You bet, bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Okay. You have time for one more witness?
Yes,
All right.
he's on Zoom as well.
Okay.
It's Joseph Janos.
Joseph Janos for the person on the, above me. Okay, still have Dr. Stark. There it is. Sir, what's your
Good
name?
morning. Joseph Janis.
Could you spell it for us?
Yes, Joseph Janos.
Thank you. Can you raise your right hand? You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Niski's going to have some questions for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And how do you pronounce it? Is it Janos? Is that correct?
Janis, yes, ma'am.
Janis. Mr. Janis, do you work for a federal agency?
Yes, ma'am. I work for the United States Customs and Border Protection. I'm an intelligence officer currently assigned to the Detroit field office.
Now, how long have you been employed in that capacity?
20 years, ma'am.
Now, as part of your position, do you assist law enforcement with providing information about border crossings?
Yes, ma'am. If a agency reaches out, we will provide that information, provided they follow the procedures required.
Now, what type of records does the U.S. Customs and Border Protection keep with respect to border crossings?
We keep records of individuals transiting in and out of the United States through ports of entry, designated ports of entry such as airports, land borders, and any secondary inspections, results of secondary inspections of individuals. So if a person were to cross the border and enter the United States from a foreign country, they would potentially be sent inside for an inspection. If we do send them inside for what's called a secondary inspection, we would record those results in our systems.
So as a result of that, does the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency keep records and reports of individuals who have been documented as crossing the border in one of these ports of entry.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, part of your position, you indicated you assist law enforcement with providing reports or records of border crossings for individuals, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, were you asked in late summer, early fall of last year, 2022, to provide records and reports for border crossings relating to Yenli Garcia with a date of birth of 4/19 of 1978?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you provide 3 reports from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency of some of those border crossings relating to Yenli Garcia?
Yes, ma'am. A request was submitted and the reports were provided.
Now, I have in my hand what has been marked as Exhibit Number 2, and it's entitled the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, U.S. Department of Homeland Security. It's TECS-Person Encounter List, and it is page 1 of 1. Are you familiar with that document?
Yes, ma'am.
And it appears in the top left corner under the Homeland Security seal that it was generated on 10/24 of 2022 at 10 o'clock EDT.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is that a document that you provided and a record that you have access to in your capacity with Customs and Border Protection?
Yes, ma'am.
And what type of document is that, if you could please explain to us?
So all of our information is captured in a system called TEX. It stood for Treasury Enforcement Computer System. This was back when the Treasury Department had Customs and Immigration belonged to the Department of Justice before the creation of Homeland Security. So all crossing information is captured in TEX. That is the official system of record for United States Customs and Border Protection. So anytime an individual crosses the border, their information is recorded in the TEX system. So when we receive a request for crossing information, it is generated out of that system. In this case, the person encounter list. So if you look at the document, you'll see that the subject had crossed within the time frames requested, which was the beginning of 2022 until October 15th, 2022. You'll see that the individual had 3 encounters with us.
All right. And Your Honor, I guess at this point I'd move for admission of Exhibit Number 2.
Any objection?
I just want to make sure I see it, so it's the one that I'm looking at, but I think it's the same. No objection.
It'll be received.
Now, if you could describe to the court what you said that there were 3 encounters with your agency within that time frame, which was January 1st through October 15th of 2022. Where were those 3 encounters?
The first encounter was on 8/21 of 22 at 8:11 a.m. That is a record of the subject departing the United States outbound into Canada. So if you look at the document itself, starting from left to right, you'll see the last name, first name, date of birth, the document type, document number, the time, the date, any carrier code. That would be if an airline was involved. The number, again, if an airline, in or out, is what the IO stands for, the site. What kind of, who the inspector was. In this case, for the first one, it's pre-primary, meaning they were leaving via land border. And the type, in this case, it states Canada, CBSA, Canada Border Services Agency. Further across the document, you'll see if it was an updated status, an updated status, referral, and arrival departure locations. Those arrival departure locations are mainly used for airlines.
Now, the first record you indicated that Yenli Garcia departed the United States on August 21st, 2022 at 8:11 in the morning over the Ambassador Bridge to Canada?
That is correct.
Okay. And does it indicate when, if on that day he was either returned to the United States.
Yes, ma'am. The next line up, it shows that he arrived inbound in the United States on August 21st, 2022 at 9:27 a.m. in a vehicle.
Now, above that, there is an indication or a notation from September 9th of 2022. If you could indicate what that information is.
That is, actually, ma'am, that's September 10th,
I'm sorry,
2022.
September 10th.
And that was the individual had booked a flight outbound. So on 9/10/22, for American Airlines Flight 2705, they were scheduled to travel outbound. However, they were not on board the flight when it left. The flight was supposed to arrive in Havana, Cuba, departing from Miami, Florida.
So do you know or receive information specific to when that flight reservation was made?
I do not have that information handy, ma'am.
Okay, but at least to the information that your agency receives, at some point, Yenli Garcia booked a flight out of the United States destined for Cuba that was set to depart on September 10th of 2022.
Yes, ma'am. The airlines are required to provide us the list of passengers for bookings starting 72 hours out of the flight.
Now, I want to direct your attention to a separate document here marked as Exhibit Number 3. It's entitled U.S. Customs and Border Protection, U.S. Department of Homeland Security Text Person Query Detail. It is a 2-page document that on the upper left-hand corner under the seal indicates it was generated on October 24th of 2022 at 10:03 EDT. Are you familiar with this document?
Yes, ma'am.
And is this a document that you created based on the information that you were requested to provide to law enforcement?
Yes, ma'am.
And, Your Honor, I guess at this point, I would move for admission of Exhibit Number 3.
Mr. Hunting?
Again, can I see it just to make sure that I'm looking at the same document? No objection, Your Honor.
Will be received.
And what information is provided on Exhibit Number 3, the text person query detail, that 2-page report?
So this document is what we call an IOIL, an incident log. It was generated on August 21st, 2022 at 11:59 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, involving the subject, Mr. Garcia. You can see his personal data is in there as you go down the document. And then eventually the narrative of why we created this document.
All right, and what does this indicate as far as why the document was created?
The individual was refused entry from Canada and encountered in the United States by officers. He was sent into secondary for a status check. Once he was inside secondary, he presented a employment authorization document, which is not a valid document for re-entry. He also presented a valid commercial driver's license. Officers conducted queries and noticed that he was a positive match to an FBI number for a criminal history. Due to the criminal history, they did a pat down on the individual to make sure he had no contraband weapons, anything like that. And that is what generated the document, the fact they took him in the back, conducted a pat down.
Can I just ask you a question? You said he was, pat down was conducted. Is there any searches that are done with respect to the vehicle that he was in?
Every vehicle that gets sent as secondary is searched, yes, ma'am.
And if there was anything of significance located, would that be contained within this document?
It would be in one of the documents provided, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and what type of search is conducted of vehicles?
What we call either a 7 or 14-point inspection, where we look for certain areas where contraband is commonly found, items of that nature, ma'am.
All right. Now, you indicated that, that this report reflects that he was not permitted entry into Canada because of his status, and that he was then, because of the information they had, a pat-down was conducted and a search was conducted. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, what citizenship was, what was the citizenship of Yenli Garcia?
He is a citizen of Cuba, ma'am.
Sorry, what was that?
A citizen of Cuba.
Oh, thank you.
And what was his current immigration status with the United States of America?
So he's currently under what is called a final order of removal from an immigration judge. However, due to the fact we cannot deport him to Cuba, he's been allowed to stay here.
So if you could explain that to the court, what that essentially means.
So due to, and I don't have his file in front of me, but due to whatever criminal history, whatever, he had been processed for a case in front of an immigration judge. The immigration judge found that he was no longer able to reside in the United States and ordered him deported. So once they're ordered deported, you're given what is called an order of removal, or in this case, a final order of removal, which means that we have an agreement with that country to send you back. We shall, once we get all the documents in place, be it a travel document, things of that nature. However, we do not have an agreement with the Cuban government to return persons to Cuba. Because of that, the subject has been allowed to stay in the United States.
Now, because of that, was he then released from immigration at that point of entry?
Yes, ma'am.
And what time was he released?
According to the report, he was released at 1200 hours, so noon.
So if I understand the timing of this, the documentation shows he left the United States through the Ambassador Bridge at approximately 8:21 in the morning, and then was refused and returned back at 9:27.
He entered Canada at 8:11 in the morning, was returned to the United States at 9:27, and was released from secondary at noon.
And did you receive information that he attempted to seek asylum in Canada?
Yes, during conversations with our counterparts with the
Objection,
Canadian
Your
Border
Honor.
Service,
You're
Hang on, sir. Sorry, what's the question?
Objection.
If he received information, you can just answer yes or no. Did you receive information that he attempted to seek asylum in Canada?
yes, ma'am.
Well, I'd like a ruling, I guess, on my objection before the prosecutor determines what
Right,
can I
right,
answer.
right. As far as, did he receive information for his job is, I don't think that's an out-of-court statement for the truth. I think it's just what he did in his investigation. It's no different than a police officer, so I'll allow it.
All right,
That
thank you.
question I have no problem with, Your Honor, but the prior question.
Fair enough.
Okay. Now, moving on to what I have marked as exhibit number 4, it indicates it is a report, a 5-page report entitled Incident 2022 AR 0012657. Are you familiar with this record or document? Describe to the court what this document is and what is contained within it.
So this document was generated out of a system called CCATS. It is our official system record for arrests, seizures, and items of that nature. In this case, it shows that the individual was arrested in Houston at the International Airport on 9/9/2022.
Now, when you say arrested, was the United States Customs and Border Protection aware that this individual, Yenli Garcia, was going to be returning to the United States into the Houston International Airport on that particular day?
It appears so, ma'am, due to an active warrant for a homicide.
So does this information contain, or does this report contain information about where he was located and from where he arrived to the Houston International Airport?
Yes, ma'am. On the narrative starting on page 4, it states that he was a citizen of Cuba who had arrived on American Airlines flight 2378 from, and I will butcher this and I apologize, Querétaro, Mexico. He was being transported by 2 Mexican immigration officials. They turned him over to United States Customs and Border Protection based on an active warrant for homicide. Again, another pat-down was conducted of him, which was negative. He was then processed and turned over, given an immigration detainer, turned over to the United States Marshals.
So is there any information that is being held by the United States Customs and Border Protection that indicates at what point Yenli Garcia crossed into, or when and where he crossed into Mexico?
Not that I'm aware of, ma'am.
And based on your experience, what types of records does Mexico keep, if any, for individuals who cross into Mexico from any of the borders of the United States?
I couldn't speak on that, ma'am. I do not know.
So it's not information that you have readily accessible to you?
No, ma'am.
And I guess the reason why I'm asking is that in exhibit number 2, the text, the initial one-page text report, it indicates that you had information that he left the United States at 8:17, or it was around 8:20 or something in the morning.
Yes, ma'am.
With respect to the Mexican border, does the United States keep those kind of records? I guess I'm just looking for some information on that.
We have different agreements with different countries about information sharing and record sharing. We have a different agreement with Canada than we do Mexico. So the Canadians and our country and Canada share crossing information that we can access via our own systems. In this case, we can see where the individual left the country to go to Canada via the land border. However, we do not have the same agreement with the Mexican government. So I cannot see when the individual entered Mexico from the United States if they entered through a designated port of entry.
So all you know is he was returned by Mexican immigration officials to the Houston airport on September 9th of 2022 due to an active warrant for a homicide.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you by chance know where, and I'll probably butcher it too, is it Querétaro?
No idea, ma'am.
Okay, you don't know how close that is to the border?
No, ma'am.
I don't have any, oh, you know what, let me move for admission of exhibit number 4.
No objection, Your Honor.
It'll be received. I do have a question though for you, Mr. Janice, before Mr. Hunting has some more questions for you. From exhibit 2, which is the one record that shows that he was due on a flight from Miami to Havana, how is it that you have a record of that when he's departing the country, but you don't have a record of him going from the United States to Mexico? Does that have to do with the agreement you spoke of?
That, because the flight was booked through the airline, and the airlines are required for flights departing or arriving in the United States to share the manifest with the United States Customs and Border Protection beginning 72 hours out of the flight departure date.
All right, so if I cross into Mexico in a car, you have no record of it?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hunting?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Janice, my name is Mark Hunting. I represent Mr. Garcia. How are you, sir?
Well, sir, how are you today?
Doing well, thank you. Let's stay on the topic of that flight in exhibit number 2. It indicates that there's a booking for Mr. Garcia on September 10th, 2022 on an American Airlines flight, apparently flight 2705, and that flight is from Miami to Havana.
Yes, sir, according to the record.
And do you have any idea when that booking was made?
I do not, sir.
Are you aware that Mr. Garcia was taken into custody in Mexico on September 7th?
I had to look at our records, but I do not know the day he was taken into custody in Mexico. No, sir, I do not.
But you do know that he arrived back in Houston with Mexican immigration officials on September 9th, correct?
That is correct.
Is it possible that this booking on American Airlines could have been done by the Mexican officials before they realized that he needed to go back to America as opposed to going to Havana?
That I don't know, sir.
Is it possible?
I don't know, sir, because the question would be, if that were the case, why wouldn't they just send him from Mexico to Cuba direct?
I don't know. I don't know whether they can.
Neither do I, sir.
Okay, fair enough, I'm just asking.
Yeah, I understand.
In any case, we don't know who booked that, nor do we know when that was booked.
I do not, sir.
Okay. However, Mr. Garcia arrives in Houston in custody and gets arrested officially here in the United States a day before this flight was to leave anyways, correct?
It appears to be that way, sir.
So even if Mr. Garcia was the one who booked that flight with some sort of intention to flee the country, it makes no difference because he's already under arrest and in custody in Houston, isn't that true?
That's your take, yes, sir.
Okay. I mean, he's not getting released, correct? There's a murder warrant for him, a homicide warrant for him,
Yeah.
correct?
I certainly hope not, sir.
Correct me if I'm wrong as I take a look at Exhibit 2, but the third sort of line item, when he is leaving the United States via the Ambassador Bridge, there is a document number, it starts with a G. I'm not going to read it into the record, but I assume that is Mr. Garcia's driver's license number. Is that fair?
I would assume the same, sir.
Okay, and so when he's going through the checkpoint to exit the country, this is how he identifies himself
To the Canadian
to
officials.
the Canadian officials. He could have given, if he had one, for example, a passport, right?
If he had it, yes, sir, he could have given that.
Okay. I don't see that same number on the document number when he returns at 9:27. Is there a reason for that?
Depending, sir. So only certain documents are allowed to be used to enter the United States. A regular driver's license is not one of them.
Okay. So is that one of the reasons why he gets subjected to the higher level of search?
Of that, and he was refused entry from Canada.
All right. Taking a look at Exhibit 3, Mr. Janice, there's a number of things that are blacked out, specifically individuals' names, I presume. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Is that just simply to protect those individuals' identity because they're involved in border crossing protection and things like that?
It's the policy of the United States Customs Border Protection to redact individual names from reports that are released. Yes, sir.
Because I'll be honest with you, I don't see your name anywhere on any of these documents. And tell me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
Okay.
It's redacted.
Okay, so it would be there, but it's redacted somewhere.
Correct. If you were to look under the documents where it says generated by, at the very top of the document,
Mm-hmm.
and at the very top of each page,
Got it?
that's where my name would be.
All right. But it's only because you were asked to check into this, correct? You didn't have any investigative role yourself, correct?
We were asked by the police department to generate, to see if we could provide border crossing records, if any.
And I guess.
So that's where my role came into play.
Okay, and I guess I didn't phrase that very artfully, but my point is, you didn't do any searching, you didn't do any talking with Mr. Garcia. Basically, you were asked to find out whether or not he had done any border crossings, and this is the report that was generated, correct?
Correct. I was not at the port of entry for his inspection.
So, I'm not sure you can see him or not, but before today, you'd never actually seen Mr. Garcia, correct?
Oh, no, sir.
All did you have any involvement, Mr. Janis, in trying to recover or obtain any property from the Mexican authorities? Or would that have been the Marshal
No, sir.
Service?
Then not me, sir. I would assume the Marshal Service.
One moment, Your Honor. Do you also, you say you share information, or we, I guess as a country, share information with Canada. Do you also get the Canadian reports?
Their privacy laws are a little different than ours, so could I get the reports under our mutual agreements? I could, however, I could not release them because it would be a third-party release. So if anyone wanted the reports for the Canadians, they would have to request them themselves.
Okay. So,
And we would facilitate that request.
I'm sorry, you could facilitate that request, but you couldn't do it without
Correct.
permission? Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Are you all set? Mr. Hunting?
I am, thank you, Your Honor.
Any further?
No.
All right, thank you, Mr. Janis.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Have a great day.
You as well, sir.
All right, we're gonna break for lunch. Probably it's gonna be closer to 1:15 before we get rolling, so I'll see y'all then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you know how? What is 12?
No, I got more of my, but I'll give them to you. Got a long day. When are we starting up again, Jim?
1:15.
150 or 115?
1:15. 1:15.
We'll grab us up and bring it back. You don't have to pick it back, but I got you. Coke, Pepsi from there. Well, they go with Dr. Pepper.
Oh, wow, now you're really just diet Pepsi.
Okay.
Or Coke Zero too, that's also.
Christie took my lunch.
Oh, it was in that. Where was the security guy?
So, hey, before you take off.
Are those Van Andel Institute socks you have on there?
Yes, they are.
Okay, I've been staring at them, so I was staring at them for a good 20 minutes, trying to like,
Better that than something else.
see if I could read them.
Family member wants to talk real quick. Okay. And then after that, we decide.
Two bars.
If I'm just Margie's Donuts is our place. Take a, go left out of here, and then, take a right onto Main Street. Hey, it's true, we like our donuts. We like our donuts.
Even if she's right here and running over here. If she's willing now, she might say she wants to talk later.
Get some grub, some caffeine, and. All right,
We'll figure out something, we'll be here.
6. Yeah, we're halfway done.